The female criminal wearing a collar who is taking a shower is Magneto's daughter. The hot water washes away her hair dye, revealing the green short hair characteristic of mutants. All the female inmates stare at her in panic. In this timeline, the X-Men have vanished. The Brotherhood led by Magneto, and others is also missing. After mutants lost these two protective organizations, they have become pariahs. To resist the pursuit of the Sentinel Center, and the hostility of the civilian organization's purges, Magneto's daughter Polaris alone, with a group of exceptional mutants, formed an underground organization. At that time, they were tracking a fleeing mutant named Blink. The supersensory Thunderbird sensed that she was just 3 kilometers away. At this moment, Blink was cornered by the police, and was forced to use her powers to escape. Polaris and her team arrived before the police, finding Blink hiding in an abandoned room.
Who are you? Just a couple of freaks, same as you.
However, she was very alert, and the three didn't have time for much explanation, because the police had arrived on the scene, and began firing into the house. Polaris used her powers to control a handgun, and the energy-manipulating Sunfire emitted bright light to disrupt the police's vision. The three took the opportunity to escape with Blink, but unexpectedly, Sunfire, who was covering them, was shot by the police. Polaris angrily took revenge for him, but was unexpectedly captured by the police who rushed out from the alley. At Bellevue High School, District Attorney Reed and his wife Caitlin were discussing their son Andy's bullying issue with the school officials. The officials kept dodging the issue.
Andy needs help, and if he doesn't get it, I will sue this school into oblivion.
The official had never seen such a scene, and quickly went to seek help from his superiors. Meanwhile, Reed received several text messages. He needed to go to the prison to discuss a plea agreement with Polaris. He soon arrived at the Garland Detention Center, where there was a separate area for holding mutants. Reed hoped Polaris would sign the plea agreement, so that she could receive a lighter sentence. Polaris waved her fingers, and controlled the steel pin in his knee. Reed could only take out a medical report, but upon seeing it, Polaris suddenly broke down. Caitlin brought Andy home alone. Her eldest daughter Lauren was preparing for the spring concert. In the evening, Lauren changed her clothes to attend the school dance, and Caitlin repeatedly emphasized the curfew of 11:30. As soon as Lauren got into the car, she saw her brother sitting in the passenger seat. Andy said, "I've been grounded by Mom for several days."
You really want to go to a dance? It's been going on at school.
Yeah, whatever, I'm used to them.
As soon as Lauren arrived, she joined her boyfriend Jack, while lonely Andy sat alone in a corner. He was gearing up to muster the courage to flirt with his crush, when he spotted the bullies. They were angry because Reed had reported them to the school, and they dragged Andy to the locker room, and deliberately turned on the hot water to scald him. Andy struggled desperately. Suddenly, the entire space began to shake, the walls cracked continuously, and the shower heads bent. It was clear that Andy was a mutant, and he had completely lost control. The entire dance was thrown into chaos. Lauren hurriedly ran toward the locker room, and instinctively blocked falling debris. It turned out that both siblings were mutants. Lauren didn't care about exposing her abilities, and rushed in to wake her brother. Meanwhile, Thunderbird and others from the underground organization saw the news about Bellevue High School. Caitlin never expected that both her children were mutants, and she found it hard to accept. Lauren told her mother, "Do you remember when we came back from church, and almost had that car accident? If I weren't a mutant, we would have been killed already. That accident happened 3 years ago." Caitlin complained to her daughter about why she had kept it a secret for so long. Lauren hesitated to reveal the reason. Her dad was the district attorney who prosecuted mutant criminals. At this moment, agents from the Sentinel Center had arrived. They shoved Caitlin aside, who was blocking the door, and tried to forcibly take Lauren and Andy. However, when Andy saw his mom being bullied, his powers immediately spiraled out of control. Lauren quickly intervened to block the police, and they jumped into a car to escape. Unexpectedly, the pursuing agents opened fire. Lauren used her energy shield to block the bullets. The three escaped to a nearby gas station. Caitlin quickly called her husband to tell him that their children were mutants. Reed forced himself to remain calm. They gathered in the suburbs of Atlanta. Andy explained that he hadn't intended to hurt anyone. It was those bullies who had attacked him first. Reed knew his son was not at fault, but the situation had already attracted the attention of the Sentinel Center. The only solution was to leave Atlanta and escape to Mexico, where mutant laws were more lenient. Although this meant abandoning their previous life, what mattered most was the safety of the family. Meanwhile, agents from the Sentinel Center had arrived at the Central Courthouse. They were preparing to check the computer files in Reed's office. Reed quietly contacted his trusted colleague, Black Woman, hoping she could retrieve the files on the mutant organization investigation. Clearly, Reed wanted to reach out to the mutant organization for help. Although her father is very busy at this time, Lauren felt an unprecedented sense of freedom. She no longer had to hide her true self from her family, and she told her brother that he needed to learn to control his powers. Andy was curious about what his sister's powers were.
You know, when you put your hand out of the window of a moving car, push the air together, do with water too, other stuff.
And Andy's abilities were quite the opposite. He could tear apart everything around him. At the same time, Sunfire was also curious about Blink's abilities. She could teleport through portals in an instant. Suddenly, Sunfire thought of using this power to help Polaris escape from prison. But Blink replied that her powers were still unstable, and that going to a place she couldn't see could be very dangerous. She finished by giving an example. Just then, Sunfire received a call from Reed. He stated that his family needed to cross the border, and in return, he could exchange information about Polaris. After saying this, Reed pulled out the investigation file, which indicated that Polaris was already pregnant. Upon hearing this, Sunfire immediately agreed to help. The next day, he headed to the bar for the meeting, and even brushed past Stan Lee, the father of Marvel. Reed promised Sunfire, as long as he could ensure the safety of his family, he would divulge all the information about Polaris. Sunfire wrote down an address, and instructed Reed to take his family to that location tonight. However, Blink felt that Sunfire's independent action was dangerous. After hesitating, she decided to inform Thunderbird. That night, the Reed family arrived at the location agreed upon with Sunfire. Unexpectedly, just as the two groups met, agents from the Sentinel Center pursued them. Fortunately, in this critical moment, Thunderbird appeared, leading them to escape through a secret exit. But Thunderbird soon sensed something was wrong. The weapon was similar to the Sentinel robots. It could lock onto and attack mutants, and it ensnared Thunderbird. Sunfire manipulated photons to cut it open, but the robots had infiltrated from all sides. They had nowhere left to escape. Now, they had to take a risk, and trust Blink one more time. She did her best to open a portal to escort everyone out, and Andy seemed to have found a solution. But Blink could no longer hold on and fainted, and Reed, who had been shot, was arrested by the Sentinel Center. After Blink returned to headquarters, the situation worsened. She forcibly opened a portal several miles away. Having consumed too much energy, her powers were now out of control. Various portals flashed everywhere. A huge vehicle suddenly rushed in. Thunderbird quickly used his enhanced body to block the attack, but new portals opened up quickly. Some citizens charged in with weapons. Lauren used an air barrier to seal the portal, and Caitlin, as a nurse, had studied some mutant medicine. She stated that if they didn't hurry to the hospital to get the D-type super cortisone, Blink would surely be in life-threatening danger. So Sunfire took Caitlin to the hospital together. The others stayed behind to take care of Blink. Thunderbird told Lauren that before they found her, Blink had been using portals to steal food. Because the color of her pupils couldn't be hidden, she couldn't find any work as a mutant. After being captured, Blink had to escape from prison, which is why she was being pursued. Soon after, Sunfire and Caitlin arrived at the emergency department of South District Hospital. This was the only hospital in town that served mutants. Caitlin had Sunfire expose an old wound on his arm, and pretended to be his girlfriend, helping him into the ER for treatment. The doctor quickly stitched up Sunfire's wound, and noticed the bruises on Caitlin's face. He called her aside, asking if Caitlin had been a victim of domestic violence, because, from the perspective of ordinary people, mutants were seen as inherently violent. Caitlin sent the doctor away and brought a uniform, then slipped into the pharmacy to distract the nurse. She took a bag and filled it with various special medications, but just as she walked out, she saw the doctor talking to the police. Caitlin quickly pulled Sunfire to escape, and Sunfire used photons to seal the back door. They hurriedly left together. However, before they could return, Lauren was already on the brink of collapse. Her energy consumption is severe. Thunderbird and Andy managed to fend off the SWAT team outside, but the number of portals at headquarters was increasing. Thunderbird could only lead everyone to retreat for now. Meanwhile, the duo retrieving the medications was heading back. Caitlin had never imagined that the treatment of mutants was so bad, and she asked how Sunfire's family dealt with it.
When I first lit up, I was 13. They kicked me out the same day.
It was Polaris who saved Sunfire in the darkness, and that's why he deeply loves her. Caitlin was still in shock when she suddenly felt a primal fear. Sunfire urged her to remain calm. This was a protective measure from headquarters. There was a mutant in the underground organization who could project fear, causing people to instinctively steer clear of headquarters. As soon as they got out of the car, they saw portals everywhere. Large numbers of mutants were evacuating. Fortunately, Lauren and the others had not left yet. Caitlin instructed Sunfire to take care of the kids, and she rushed in to help Blink with the injection. Thanks to her assistance, the situation finally stabilized. Caitlin earned Thunderbird's trust. Polaris was transferred to Lakewood County Prison, and she was wearing a power-suppressing collar around her neck. Polaris took her toiletries to the shower. The hot water washed away the color from her hair. People around her looked on in amazement. Even in prison, mutants faced discrimination, so Polaris tried to get close to others like her, but her peers didn't welcome her either.
Now stay the hell away from me.
When the inmates had outdoor recreation time, another black woman came to cause trouble.
Muties in here, they work for me. From now on, you're gonna do what you're told.
Polaris noticed that the scar on her face was caused by a mutant, so she mocked her for only daring to mess with those wearing collars. The henchman immediately knocked Polaris down to vent for his boss, and they even knew about her pregnancy. One of them kicked Polaris hard in the stomach. Polaris was put in solitary confinement for fighting. Meanwhile, Turner hoped Reed would cooperate with the investigation, but Reed didn't believe his children were guilty. And the mutant organization wasn't a terrorist group, they were merely defending their rights. But Turner harbored intense hatred for mutants, because his 7-year-old daughter had died in an energy explosion.
If the blast of energy that killed my kid came from a good mutant.
Turner's message was simple. He didn't care about the nature of the mutant organization, he only wanted to completely control it. Turner even brought Reed's mother in for questioning, saying that if she revealed the whereabouts of the mutant organization, he would let her poor mother go. If it were someone else, they might have panicked in such a situation. But Reed had worked at the Central Courthouse for 15 years. He knew that Turner was more anxious than he was. After all, the Sentinel Center had lost equipment worth millions of dollars, allowing 6 fugitives to slip away right under their noses. Turner had no choice but to threaten his family. Reed agreed to help Turner destroy the mutant underground organization, but on the condition that his wife and children would remain safe. After they reached an agreement, Turner went to see Polaris and used her children as leverage, ordering her to cooperate in dismantling the underground organization. He even called it giving Polaris time to think. Sunfire wanted to train Sparkle to help her rob the prison. Naive Caitlin suggested hiring a lawyer to defend Polaris. However, to protect headquarters, Thunderbird wouldn't let her contact the outside world. Yet Caitlin didn't give up. She planned to find her brother Danny, who worked for the government. Upon hearing this, the two kids wanted to go with their mother. At crucial moments, they could protect Caitlin. Blink's abilities hadn't fully recovered after her injuries, and she had been driven by fear all along. She needed to find something she truly cared about to overcome this hurdle in order to control her superpowers. Dreamer had a simple method. Her ability was to add or remove others' memories, so she could implant memories of her being good friends with Polaris. This would encourage Blink to master her powers for the sake of friendship. However, Thunderbird disagreed with taking shortcuts, and they had already suffered greatly with the memory implantation method. The next day, while training Blink, Thunderbird sensed Caitlin and her children had left headquarters the night before. Now they had to put aside their tasks to go find those 3 people. Caitlin was ready to take a taxi to find her brother, but she didn't have a single cent on her. Andy used his powers to destroy the parking meter. The 3 successfully arrived at Danny's uncle's house, but he was afraid of involving his family and refused to help. Caitlin tried her best to negotiate downstairs, while Andy and his cousin hid upstairs playing games. He accidentally saw a post from a schoolmate, and found that his house had been covered in graffiti by extremists. Furious, Andy nearly lost control. Reed recalled the day he met Sunfire. It was obvious that he knew the bartender there. Turner suspected that the bartender might be an informant for the underground organization, so he brought Reed near the bar. He instructed Reed to approach the bartender to extract the headquarters location, to ensure everything was foolproof. He also planted a tracker on Reed. At this moment, the bartender was taking out the trash in the backyard. Reed successfully deceived the bartender. With the prosecutor's exceptional eloquence, he lied, claiming he had escaped from the Sentinel Center and had obtained important intelligence. Now he just wanted to find his family. The bartender led Reed into a room where a mother and daughter were sitting on the sofa. The bartender planned to take them to the rendezvous point tonight, and could take Reed along the way. The woman on the sofa was named Sheila, and her entire family were mutants. Her husband had been arrested by the Sentinel Center, so Sheila could only escape with her young daughter for now, to avoid falling into the hands of the Sentinel Center. That group of people wouldn't even let go of their children. When Sheila heard that Reed had been injured by a stun gun, she used her powers to transfer his pain. Although it couldn't fully heal him, it could at least make him feel a bit better. Reed felt a twinge of guilt in his heart. That night, he and Sheila's mother and daughter headed to the pickup point, and along the way, he was in a deep inner conflict.
It's okay. Mommy said we're going to the safe place. You don't have to be scared anymore.
Reed couldn't look the child in the eyes. He quickly told the bartender to stop the car, claiming that a car was following them. The bartender reassured him not to worry, saying that his power was to make things invisible. Reed had to admit that invisibility wouldn't help, because the Sentinel Center had placed a tracker on him. He then opened the car door, sincerely apologizing to the girl, and then jumped out of the speeding car. Now that the tracker was gone, the bartender quickly made the car invisible, escorting the mother and daughter away. Meanwhile, Reed got up and informed Turner that their previous agreement was cancelled. As for Thunderbird, he finally found Caitlin, but there was a crowd of concerned citizens at the door, because Danny's foolish son had boasted to his friends last night about seeing Caitlin's mutant cousin. Exposing the location of Caitlin's family, they could only find a way to break through. Danny went out to negotiate with the neighbors to buy time, but those neighbors didn't listen to any explanation for the 300,000 bounty, and even injured Danny. Andy instantly exploded with anger and scared them off. The group immediately get in the car and escape. However, the vigilantes still pursued them relentlessly, and they opened fire on the car. When Dreamer learned about the situation, she pleaded with Blink to teleport everyone back, but Blink's powers had not yet recovered.
You can if you have someone to care about.
Dreamer implanted a segment of her own romantic memories with Thunderbird. Then the two arrived at the intersection to open a portal. They successfully passed through the portal back to headquarters. Sunfire didn't blame Caitlin for going out on her own. She simply did something foolish to save the one she loved. However, Blink's strange behavior made Thunderbird realize that Dreamer had altered her memories. The two had a rather unpleasant argument over this. Soon after, Danny's uncle contacted Caitlin, saying that he had found out information about Reed. He and a woman from an underground organization were to be transferred to a highly classified mutant detention center. The woman from the underground organization was Polaris. During her isolation, ignoring the strong current from her collar, she fought to break open the isolation room door. Unfortunately, the next moment, she couldn't hold on and fainted. When she woke up, she found herself next to Reed. The two would wait there for their transfer. The last time they met, they were in a hostile state. Reed tried to explain the recent events, but Polaris found it hard to believe him. Reed had to speak from his heart, saying that in the past, all the mutants he faced in court were guilty, so he never thought there was anything wrong with being fair as a prosecutor. But now, with his two children becoming mutants, Andy had only harmed a schoolmate in self-defense, yet the law wanted to sentence him to 10 years in prison. It was at this moment that Reed realized that society had no proper way to guide or protect mutants. The laws he had always upheld were unfair from the very beginning. Reed could only offer Polaris an apology.
You know what? Ask the hundreds of families whose lives you and your friends.
Meanwhile, Thunderbird explained to everyone the plan to attack the Sentinel Center. Only 5 mutants were willing to help. After all, this mission was extremely dangerous, and they might not return. Caitlin also felt that breaking into the heavily guarded base had a success rate close to 0. They might as well ambush the convoy on the way. The problem was that no one knew the route of the prisoner transport. Sunfire thought of a solution. Before he joined the organization, he had worked with a drug cartel for several years. Those people had connections everywhere, and they might be able to get the prisoner transport route. Sunfire took a risk and returned to the club controlled by the drug dealers, where the female boss Carmen had once been his fiancée. He explained his intentions, but his departure from the cartel had severely hurt Carmen's father. Now, she wasn't unwilling to help, but Carmen's principle was to only help friends. After saying this, she raised a glass. Sunfire knew that drinking this would mean he would be reconnected with the drug cartel, but he couldn't worry too much for the sake of saving others. Sunfire immediately sent the route to Thunderbird, but Carmen had not given a specific time yet. He stayed at the club to gather more information, while Thunderbird gathered everyone to start planning. the Sentinel Center would dispatch military vehicles for the escort team to transport Polaris, and the other to the military airport. According to their route, the best place to strike would be the warehouse at the end of Peachtree Street, although Blink had the chance to open a portal to help everyone get into the transport vehicle. The driver would notice her movements. Moreover, opening a portal inside a moving vehicle could lead to trouble at any moment. They had to come up with a way to make the transport vehicle stop midway. Sunfire's photon attacks were too conspicuous to use. Lauren immediately thought of her brother. He might be able to blow a tire on the transport vehicle, but Andy wasn't yet precise enough. A slight miscalculation could tear the whole vehicle apart. Lauren quickly came up with a solution. She suggested Andy try to blow up a nearby streetlight, then using a force field to help him aim. This method proved to be effective. Lauren immediately shared this discovery with everyone, but Caitlin didn't want the two kids to be involved in the attack on the escort team. In the end, Lauren convinced her mother, and Thunderbird promised that as soon as the car stopped, Lauren and her brother could immediately evacuate. In order to find out the exact transport time of the prisoner vehicle, Sunfire didn't hesitate to compromise his principles and obey Carmen's orders, continuing to do some shady work for the drug cartel. Now all the information was in hand. They lay in ambush along the route that the transport vehicle would take. Blink had recently been troubled by those false memories, dreaming about Thunderbird for several nights in a row.
I just have to ask, the night that we first met, did we go outside together?
Thunderbird could only awkwardly deny it, and to prevent Blink from making a mistake, he didn't want to say too much now. At this point, the vehicle had arrived at the planned location, but Andy was too nervous to use his powers.
You're the reason we're in this mess, and now you can't even help us get out.
Lauren's tactic of provoking him indeed worked, but although the car successfully blew a tire, they missed the best position, and for some unknown reason, just as Blink was about to open a portal, she suddenly realized that her powers were gone. The others experienced the same issue. Only one mutant could suppress their powers. That person was Thunderbird's best friend Pulse. 2 years ago, Pulse was hit during an operation with the underground organization. Everyone thought he was dead, but unexpectedly, he had become one of the Sentinel Center's people. Pulse could suppress the powers of all mutants within 2 blocks. Thunderbird hurried over to stop him, while Sunfire could only use conventional weapons to hold off the enemy. However, the two sides were unevenly matched, and he quickly ran out of bullets. Caitlin slipped out the side door with the children, using a tranquilizer to take down a soldier. Then she instructed Lauren to take her brother and leave first, staying behind to look for Reed. At this moment, 2 soldiers removed Polaris's collar and replaced it with mobility gear. After all, the mutants in this area had lost their abilities, but the soldiers underestimated Polaris's skills. Fortunately, the prisoner was bound with restraints. Escaping wouldn't be so simple. At this critical moment, Thunderbird found Pulse. With time running out, he couldn't wake his friend in time. He could only knock him out with a solid punch. Polaris instantly felt her powers return. However, they were locked in a plastic cubicle, unable to touch any metal. Polaris wasn't as powerful as her father, who could control things outside. Reed suddenly thought of the steel pin in his leg, and urgently signaled Polaris to remove it. Polaris made the steel pin burst out. Then she used it to cut the restraints and stab the soldier. At the same time, Sunfire created chaos with his powers, and Blink hurriedly opened a portal to escort Dreamer and the injured to leave. Turner quickly realized the situation was out of control and ordered to allow all teams to shoot mutants on sight, but the freed Polaris was already beyond their control. Turner could only lead his team to retreat. Caitlin drove over to pick them up and escape. However, the stolen vehicles were equipped with trackers, and they had to change cars immediately after shaking off their pursuers. Thunderbird suddenly spotted a Sentinel drone, and Sunfire and Polaris planned to draw it away to allow the others to retreat back to the base first. The drone was too far away. Polaris couldn't shoot it down. She cleverly broke off the rearview mirror so that Sunfire could use the mirror's reflection to destroy the drone. Reed and his wife arrived at headquarters. The family was finally reunited, but Thunderbird noticed a surge in the number of mutants here, and upon asking, he learned that Turner was furious, having attacked every place where mutants could find refuge, leaving everyone no choice but to hide at headquarters. At this moment, the bartender spotted Reed. He didn't expect to see this traitor. He started to make a move. Thunderbird stepped forward to stop him. The bartender exposed his previous collaboration with the Sentry Center in front of everyone. The crowd indeed began to reject Reed, but the most important thing now was to treat the injured. Caitlin, being a scarce medical personnel, immediately got to work. A mutant approached Dreamer, wanting her to erase Reed's memories about headquarters, because no one trusted the people from the Central Court. Dreamer nervously glanced at Blink, and Blink caught on to the crucial point. If Dreamer could manipulate memories, could it explain why she kept dreaming about Thunderbird? Blink was about to press for answers, but Dreamer deflected the questions. Meanwhile, Reed was trying to regain everyone's trust in his own way. He helped decode the police's operational codes, and discovered that Turner and his team were conducting a large-scale, net-style search for the headquarters location. At the same time, Polaris duo encountered a checkpoint by Turner halfway through their journey, but this time she didn't flee. Instead, she got out and subdued all the agents. She directly disarmed Turner and captured him. Polaris locked him in an abandoned factory. Sunfire turned his back and questioned him. "We just kidnapped a Sentinel Center agent. Do you know what this means?" Polaris urged Sunfire to stay calm. "We must take this opportunity to find out what methods they use to control Pulse. If the Sentinel Center can incite infighting among mutants, then we are completely finished." But Turner wouldn't speak even if it cost him his life. In that case, Polaris could only rely on wits. They quickly contacted Dreamer, preparing to directly extract Turner's memories. However, the Sentinel Center's reinforcements had already arrived. Polaris did her best to buy time, but the enemy launched several tear gas canisters, causing Dreamer to only read some fragments. Reed understood the police's behavior patterns very well. They must have inferred the general area of the headquarters, based on the abandoned vehicle's location, and then systematically searched and eliminated possibilities. If they wanted to mislead the Sentinel Center into the wrong direction, they had to first deliver them a fugitive. Reed planned to take the risk of going out to mislead the Sentinel Center, to prevent him from getting caught. Thunderbird persuaded the bartender to use his invisibility powers to cover Reed's movements, but the bartender harbored resentment against Reed, and almost deliberately sabotaged his efforts. At the same time, Caitlin and the children risked everything to extract blood for the patients, working tirelessly throughout the day. Finally, their family was accepted by the mutants. Dreamer drew out Turner's fragmented memories, and she saw a file called Operation Hound. It included a tattoo design on Pulse's arm, and a federal building located in Baton Rouge. Reed stated that some of the mutant criminals he had prosecuted had been transferred to that building. This place likely held information about the Hound program. Turner was rescued by reinforcements, and he hurried back home to see his daughter. Dreamer was too hasty when reading, which interfered with Turner's deep memory, and made him mistakenly believe that his daughter was not dead yet.
She died 4 years ago.
Regardless, the carjacking operation had finally come to a close. The base was filled with mutants of various abilities. A boy named Wes, who could create illusions, seemed particularly interested in Lauren. Meanwhile, Polaris was selecting promising children to train them as warriors. Just imagine how deadly it would be if these powerful mutants were controlled like Pulse. So Thunderbird planned to attack the federal building in Baton Rouge to steal information about Operation Hound. They had Blink's powers, allowing them to easily enter the building. Thunderbird immediately went to explain this to Blink.
The building, I'm just a portable door maker. Fine, if you're not gonna bring it up, I will. Your friend Dreamer stuck a memory in my head without mentioning it to me.
Blink understood the urgency of the situation at the time, but afterward, no one explained the truth to her, and expressed apologies. Blink had had enough of being a tool to open doors, so she chose to leave the headquarters. Without Blink, the difficulty of their mission skyrocketed. Just as the adults were arguing incessantly, Andy volunteered, saying, "I can handle a wall." Life and death situations aren't just for adults to handle. Reed smiled with relief upon hearing this. The next day, the three of them set off in a truck, but they were stopped by the police along the way. The officers even requested to search the truck. In a critical moment, Sunfire absorbed all the photons, successfully getting through the inspection. They stopped in a forest to take a short break. The father and son finally had a chance to talk. Reed realized that his son's powers were highly destructive, so he wanted to remind him to never misuse it. The two began to argue. Sunfire encouraged Reed not to give up. He supported Reed's approach. "If I had a responsible father back then, I definitely wouldn't have gone down the wrong path, and ended up mixing with drug dealers." Now, Sunfire was about to become a father himself, so he wanted to seek advice from Reed. Reed comforted Sunfire, telling him not to be nervous, that the instinct of love would guide him to do his best. Meanwhile, Andy, pretending to sleep, eavesdropped on his father's heartfelt intentions. At the same time, Turner was forced to endure the pain of losing his daughter twice, and his anger grew more intense. However, his superiors ordered him to take a temporary leave. so Turner had to contact someone named Dr. Campbell. The latter helped to smooth the relationship and successfully reinstated Turner, but he showed a keen interest in Lauren and her brother. Turner noticed the bald man next to the doctor, who also had a tattoo related to Operation Hound. This Campbell turned out to be the initiator of the plan. At this moment, Sunfire and the others had arrived in front of the building, but the security here was stricter than they had imagined. Sunfire first contacted Polaris to explain that the plan had changed. They planned to enter the federal building through the parking lot. Andy easily tore through the wall of the parking lot. Reed instructed his son to go back to the truck first, and then follow Sunfire into the building. Sunfire welded open the computer and took the main unit, while Reed hurriedly searched for a few documents. Although the three successfully returned to the truck, a police officer had followed them for several kilometers, and it was unusual that he didn't have his siren on. Reed asked Thunderbird to check the traffic department's announcements, and they indeed saw the warning about the highway being closed. Moreover, the police had set up checkpoints along their route. Lauren thought that Wes's abilities could come in handy. He could create illusions to help the truck evade capture. My air barrier can help as well. Polaris immediately took Wes and Lauren to a building near the checkpoint. Polaris instantly controlled the bullets. Lauren set up a barrier to carry the truck over the obstacle, and Wes created two illusionary trucks to cover the real one's escape. Turner was furious when he learned that the building had been robbed. He immediately ordered that checkpoints be set up with the blockade as the center, within an 80-kilometer radius, to conduct comprehensive mobile communication monitoring. He ignored court regulations and vowed to uncover the location of the mutant headquarters. However, Dr. Campbell had a better suggestion. He thought they should deploy mutant agents to act as undercover agents to infiltrate the underground organization. However, the Department of Justice had always opposed this approach.
We cannot deploy mutant assets against suspects.
Turner rebutted the female director. Those suspects protested that the government considered them a separated group, since they didn't want to abide by the law like American citizens. Why should they enjoy the rights of American citizens? The female director replied, "I'm very familiar with this rhetoric. In the 1950s, some people accused Catholics in the same way, and in the 2000s, there were accusations against Muslims. Do you want to see the ruling of the Supreme Court at that time?" She left everyone speechless, but unexpectedly, she suddenly collapsed from a stroke. Turner noticed that it was the doctor's mutant subordinate who attacked the female director from the Department of Justice. At this moment, Sunfire was also facing a tricky situation. He promised the drug dealer's female boss Carmen to be on call in order to obtain information about the prison truck. Now, she ordered Sunfire to come to the cartel, so he had to go out alone under the pretext of picking up supplies. Polaris noticed he hadn't returned for a long time, so she called to ask and found out that the base hadn't received supplies for weeks. The director had never even seen Sunfire. Polaris immediately went to ask Dreamer about it. It was then that she learned that during her capture, Sunfire had gotten involved with the drug cartel again. Carmen wanted Sunfire to sabotage the competitor's goods, and claimed that this trip wouldn't harm anyone. Moreover, Carmen was willing to pay a sum of money.
You can use the money to buy something nice for your mutant friends. I hear it's pretty tight over there.
Sunfire had to agree. While the hard drive was still being decrypted, Thunderbird decided to find Blink. It wasn't safe for her to be out alone, and if she were caught by the Sentinel Center, the entire headquarters would be at risk of exposure. Using his enhanced senses, he quickly located Blink. He sincerely expressed his apologies, and hoped that Blink would come back with him. However, everyone has their obsessions. Before being rescued by the underground organization, she had been searching for a road that was very important in her memories. She wanted to know what that road meant. Thunderbird suggested, "I can help you look for it. At least let me return a favor." After some hesitation, Blink accepted Thunderbird's help. Back at the base, Reed unlocked the document with the lowest confidentiality in the hard drive, which contained files on mutant criminals collected by the police. From the content, it seemed that they had categorized mutants based on their required abilities. Reed saw Wes's file and found out that he had robbed a jewelry store for personal gain. Knowing that his daughter was close to Wes, he quickly found Caitlin and went to see Lauren to show her the criminal file and hoped she would stay away from Wes.
You haven't changed. You ask all these questions and prove you're right, and you're just assuming he's guilty.
The father and daughter ended up parting on bad terms over this, while Reed questioned the female hacker. "How do you usually vet new members at your headquarters? After all, there are many mutants here who evade legal sanctions." The hacker replied that there are some things that can never be forgiven, such as murder, rape, and persecution of others. for other crimes, as long as one is honest. Everything in the organization is built on trust. If someone conceals their criminal history, then they must leave. Although Lauren had a fight with her father, she immediately went to question Wes. Is the criminal on the file you? Wes explained that after being kicked out by his parents, he fell into despair and joined the theft organization just to make a living. Lauren understood that he wasn't in control of his situation, but she didn't accept Wes's deliberate concealment. Caitlin also advised Reed to change his perspective. You are no longer a prosecutor but a father now. You should change the way you handle problems. After some hesitation, Reed went to talk to Wes. He candidly said, I didn't report you for lying, but for the underground organization to continue existing. Trust is the most important thing, so I want you to make your own decision. Meanwhile, Sunfire followed Carmen's instructions and arrived at the competitor's warehouse. A mutant from the drug cartel directly immobilized the guard. Sunfire released photons to burn the cargo boxes. He was surprised to find that he actually missed the feeling of destroying everything. Unbeknownst to him, Polaris happened to see this scene. She didn't step in to stop Sunfire, because Polaris knew that the other party must find the right direction on their own. On the other side, Thunderbird was helping Blink search for that road. He suggested starting from the place she felt safest in her heart, so Blink took Thunderbird to the boarding house, where she lived at the age of 15. It was the only 2 years of peaceful life she had, but Thunderbird discovered something through the ground marks. They speculated that the Sentinel Center people had been here, and the two rushed into the farmhouse. Sure enough, they saw bullet holes in the door, and the ground was stained with crimson blood. If before Blink dealt with the Sentinel Center, it was merely to repay Thunderbird and the others, but now the situation was completely different, because the Sentinel Center had harmed those Blink cared about. In the evening, Wes found the Reed family at dinner, explaining that he had confessed his past to everyone. After discussions, the headquarters people were willing to let him off the hook, but Wes was about to head to the Augusta station, where he would start anew. Soon after, Thunderbird returned with Blink. The hacker girl broke through most of the security restrictions on the hard drive, and discovered that Operation Hound wasn't a government initiative, but a product of Trask Industries. Trask was the company of Dr. Campbell, and also the place where the Sentinel robots were invented. Reed's father Otto had worked there for 35 years, and he had thought Trask had gone bankrupt back in 2006. Now, Campbell was secretly breeding a large batch of mutants there. All of them were completely controlled like Pulse. Long before Lauren and Andy were born, Reed had severed ties with his father. Even though they were only a 2-hour drive apart, he had never gone to see him. The two kids didn't even know that Grandpa Otto was still alive. In Reed's memory, his father was always busy with work. Once, he almost died from a serious illness, but his father never visited him in the hospital. But now, the matter involved everyone's safety. Reed had to talk to him. However, the mutant base in Perry had just fallen. Thunderbird needed to go rescue the survivors first. He would figure out a way after he returned to let Reed contact his father. Thunderbird and his team quickly arrived in Perry, where the local priest was hiding a group of mutants to help them relocate. But one blonde girl called out to Thunderbird, saying that her ability was telepathy. She sensed that a certain survivor had very strange thoughts. Thunderbird grabbed that survivor and discovered that she had a tattoo related to Operation Hound. Thunderbird was caught off guard and was kicked back. As this person moved with incredible speed and agility, Sunfire immediately sprang into action, trapping her. Afterward, Thunderbird locked the spy mutant in a cage. The hacker girl believed they should immediately stop taking in new members, but Thunderbird couldn't abandon all his kind. He called Reed to set out to see if they could get any clues from Otto. Dreamer tried to read the spy's memories, but the spy moved too quickly, and her metabolism far exceeded that of an ordinary person. She couldn't read anything at all. At this moment, Sunfire noticed the spy biting her nails. It looked like the withdrawal symptoms of an addict. The drug the mutant was using was called Keck, which could temporarily enhance their abilities, making the user feel invincible. Caitlin planned to help her detox first. As Andy and Lauren worked together to restrain the spy, Caitlin took the opportunity to inject her with a sedative. Then Sunfire and Polaris secured her to prevent her from waking up and running wild. Blink noticed a girl who seemed hesitant to talk to others due to her unusual appearance. Blink also had unique eyes, so she took the initiative to approach the girl. She learned that she, like herself, came from a host family on Bun Hill Road. The little girl must have witnessed the scene of her foster parents being killed. Blink privately approached Dreamer hoping she could help the girl erase her nightmarish memories. The two finally let go of their barriers through this matter. At this moment, Reed brought Thunderbird to the antique shop run by Otto. The old man had been staying there since his retirement. He bluntly stated that the people from the Sentinel Center had been there. I won't disclose any secrets about Trask, and that company has long since gone bankrupt.
It opened up again. They are doing anti-mutant research. Now, you worked there for 30 years. And it just turns out that your grandchildren happen to be...
Otto invited the two upstairs. He asked for a photo of Lauren and her brother to examine closely.
I didn't mean much to you, but the kids mean everything.
Dare say that. Everything I did in my life was for you.
Otto realized he was losing composure and quickly asked what abilities Lauren and Andy had. After hearing the answer, he looked utterly defeated.
I failed. Came back.
Otto took out a photo of his father Andreas and a photo of his aunt Andrea. He said that these two siblings had abilities identical to those of Lauren and her brother, but they were terrorists and had done many heinous acts. They were known as the Fenris twins. The two siblings could unleash an incredibly powerful destructive force simply by holding hands. Moreover, Otto was also a mutant, and Andreas had intended to train him as his successor. But after the old man escaped from home, he hid his abilities and joined Trask Industries. He wanted to use the company's resources to research a serum to eliminate the X gene, so Otto had no connection to Operation Hound. Reed nearly died back then, because Otto had injected him with the serum. Although this act successfully turned Reed into an ordinary person, it nearly cost him his life. That's why Otto felt he couldn't face his wife and children, and chose to leave. But he never expected that his grandchildren would inherit the abilities of the Fenris twins. At this moment, Dr. Campbell chased after them, and he brought along the walking shield pulse. Otto instructed Reed and the others to hide, while he went downstairs to unleash his powers. This force was so powerful that even Pulse could not shield it. Campbell's subordinates had to open fire. Otto ignited his energy, causing an explosion. When Reed and Thunderbird regained consciousness, they saw the bodyguard helping Campbell escape. They went downstairs to find that Otto had already lost his breath. Pulse was left lying on the street, barely alive. Thunderbird looked at his old friend and vowed to take revenge for him. The scene shifted back to the headquarters. The hacker girl found information about the spy in the hard drive archives. Her name was Chloe. She used to live in a trailer park with her daughter, but after her child fell ill, the pediatrician refused to treat mutants. In her anger, she destroyed the clinic and was arrested on the spot by Sentinel robots. At this time, Chloe had regained consciousness, but she didn't know what Campbell had done to her. Chloe couldn't even speak. Caitlin suddenly remembered the blonde telepath. She could understand what Chloe was trying to say. The telepath quickly pinpointed the Trask Industries laboratory and saw Campbell's appearance, but Chloe soon ran out of energy and died quickly. In the dead of night, Reed and Thunderbird buried the bodies of their loved ones and friends in the forest. Caitlin saw her husband's expression and knew that something bad had happened. Lauren and her brother also held each other's hands tightly. This scene evoked memories from a year ago, when the family of three went out for a picnic. Lauren tried skateboarding under her brother's encouragement, but ended up slipping and nearly falling. Fortunately, Andy caught her hand just in time. At that moment, they both felt a strange energy. After learning about Grandpa Otto, they went to the library and found reports on the Fenris twins. It stated that they were one of the most powerful mutants in history. Reed wanted to know if the children were truly like the Fenris twins, so he had them hold hands to combine their powers. To his surprise, a surge of energy flowed around them. Reed quickly knocked their hands apart. To him, this energy felt more like a curse than a gift. The telepath wanted to rush to the Trask laboratory to rescue her trapped family members, but acting recklessly before understanding the building's security details would be tantamount to sending herself to her death. At night, Polaris dreamed that his relatives and friends were being trained as hounds. This nightmare changed her mind. It was intentionally orchestrated by the telepath. Everyone knew very little about the Trask laboratory. The hacker girl compared credit card usage data near the laboratory and found that employees of Trask liked to spend money at a certain bar where they could blend in to extract information from the guards or staff. Since they were going undercover in a bar, it was naturally assigned to the female members to handle. That night, Polaris and Dreamer disguised themselves to chat with a security guard from Trask. To their surprise, this guy started boasting about his heroic deeds of how he tortured mutants.
To the temple, and they drop.
Dreamer became disinterested in pretending and immediately read the bald man's memories. she successfully stole the login password for Trask's internal network. From the company intranet, it was revealed that the laboratory had been specially reinforced to withstand mutant attacks. It was also equipped with motion and infrared sensors, and the laboratory was too far away. Blink's teleportation portal was unstable. The only way was to have Andy and Lauren destroy the power station several miles away to enter the laboratory before the system returned to normal. Reed agreed to let the kids help, but he and Caitlin had to stay nearby to monitor the security system and ensure they were always by the kids' side. An hour later, everyone acted according to plan. However, since Chloe was captured, Turner suspected that mutants would attack the Trask laboratory. He instructed his subordinates to conduct a thorough check, but they found no abnormal conditions. The laboratory personnel all seemed very ordinary, and all background checks were very clean. Only one was on sick leave, and one was out of town for a funeral.
Who's sick leave?
Security guard called last night.
Upon hearing this, Turner had someone log into the Trask employee system to pull up the security guard's information for review. They discovered that he had accessed the substation system. Turner guessed that the mutants intended to sabotage the substation, so he quickly dispatched Sentinel agents to that location. But the substation had a complex structure, and Blink couldn't open a portal through hundreds of walls, entering a room she had never seen before, let alone a room that contained high-voltage transformers. Just as they were circling around the building, Turner had already pinpointed several locations. He also brought Sentinel robots, and after the previous failure, the Sentinel robots had been upgraded and would not be easily torn apart by Andy. Blink was caught by the robots before she could escape, and Dreamer stayed behind to protect the two kids, risking herself to buy them time. Thunderbird, waiting for news outside the laboratory, realized that the operation had been compromised, and quickly led Sunfire and the telepath to evacuate. Meanwhile, Lauren and her brother were trapped underground, with no way to retreat. They had to risk using their immense power. Fortunately, at the last moment, Andy suddenly realized that now they were trapped underground. If they destroyed the walls, the entire building would collapse, and everyone inside would die. They had to surrender, and were fitted with suppression collars. Caitlin and her husband watched helplessly as their children were captured, but couldn't rush in to save them. After everyone returned to the base, they had a big fight. Polaris believed they should raid the Sentinel Center. If those two kids became hounds, then the underground organization of mutants would be completely finished. But Reed and Caitlin were worried about putting the kids in danger, and disagreed with taking the risk. Thunderbird and Sunfire urged them to calm down. The priority was to monitor the Sentinel Center, and every move of Trask Industries. As soon as there was an opportunity, they would rescue their people. As for Turner, he was interrogating the captured mutants, and still held a grudge against Dreamer for interfering with his memories, but the mutants didn't know the consequences it would cause. They could only apologize to Turner.
No. I want you to pay.
From Dreamer and Blink, he couldn't extract any useful information, so Turner was prepared to hand them over to Trask Industries for Hound research. But Campbell only cared about Lauren and her brother. Turner didn't want to hand over minors to him, but remembering the pain of losing his daughter, he reluctantly agreed. At the base, the telepath was secretly using her abilities. She was one of the Cuckoo Sisters, Esme. In Marvel Comics, she is a clone of the White Queen. The three of them shared a hive mind, and could create a unique mental energy connection. The three had infiltrated a presidential campaign team, but their exposure led to the capture of the other two sisters. Esme was best at using her telepathic abilities to read and manipulate the thoughts of others. By probing Reed's mind, she realized that Turner wasn't a cold-blooded person, so she suggested that Reed and Caitlin negotiate with him. Although Turner wouldn't release the mutants, there was still a chance to persuade him to imprison everyone for their sentences, instead of being sent to the laboratory for drug injections and becoming Campbell's lackeys. After seeing the couple take action, she immediately went to find Polaris and the others. She said she just saw Reed and Caitlin leave.
It's some idea about convincing Agent Turner to get everyone out of the lab.
Thunderbird suddenly realized, if Reed and Caitlin could really persuade Turner, we could rescue our comrades during the transfer. Campbell had the siblings put on clothes that could detect their mutant power levels. Then he locked them in a laboratory made of adamantium. Campbell used the lives of Dreamer and Blink as leverage, forcing the two to combine their powers.
Don't do what he...
Dreamer's death completely shattered the siblings. They couldn't afford to lose Blink as well. They could only hold hands to release their energy together. and this force was difficult to resist even for adamantium. Campbell also extracted data after they combined. Reed and Caitlin arrived at Turner's home. The two men started arguing like they were in a debate, and soon their discussion turned to values. Caitlin stopped her agitated husband, and earnestly told Turner and his wife, "I have seen mutants who have been altered." She was injected with various addictive substances, and was subjected to mental conditioning. She was made to obey Campbell's orders unconditionally, turning her into the perfect killing machine. "And my children are 15 and 17 years old. They shouldn't be subjected to such inhumane treatment." After Caitlin finished speaking, she called Reed to leave.
"Baby, what are you doing in our little girl's name?"
Turner ultimately came to his senses, and decided to go to the laboratory, to transfer the mutant prisoners, but upon arrival, he learned that Dreamer was dead. This discovery further solidified Turner's resolve. Meanwhile, Thunderbird received immediate news that the people from the Sentinel Center were arriving at the Trask laboratory in a large transport vehicle. They quickly rushed to the scene to prepare to hijack the vehicle. When Reed and Caitlin returned to headquarters, they discovered that Esme had lied. It was this woman who was manipulating everything from behind the scenes. At this moment, Esme knocked out Sunfire, and then took control of the transport personnel's minds, forcing them to disable their collars and commit suicide. Poor Turner watched as a large number of his subordinates died at the hands of the mutants. This feud was truly insurmountable, while the Cuckoo Sisters gained an extraordinary ability to control. Due to their close mental connection, they forcefully commanded a group of enemies to kill each other, instantly turning the tide of the situation. However, the underground organization felt that they had been used, so they cut off contact with the Cuckoo Sisters. The Cuckoo's responsibility was to rebuild the Hellfire Club. According to Magneto's philosophy, they aimed to bring down human bases, but achieving this goal required more manpower. At this time, both the mutant underground organization and Turner's side were holding funerals for their deceased friends. Dreamer's death cast a shadow of sorrow over headquarters. However, the Cuckoo Sisters suddenly visited, and stated they were there for the Hound program. As long as this project was not terminated, mutants would never find peace, so she hoped that the mutants would cooperate with her to eliminate the Hound program together. But Esme had just manipulated everyone. The headquarters was completely divided into two factions. One faction didn't trust the sisters, while the other believed that cooperation was the only way to win. Due to too many recent incidents, Reed and Caitlin decided to take the children to Mexico. Although Lauren and her brother didn't want to leave, their parents didn't give them a choice. The next day, the family of four first arrived at the Fairburn base, and there they met Wes. They stayed there overnight to make some adjustments. Unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, Esme approached Andy. She was best at manipulating people's hearts, and knew that Andy was reluctant to escape.
You're not a child anymore, Andy. We need you guys. Maybe we need you most of all.
Meanwhile, Esme's sisters also found Polaris, and they were indeed willing to cooperate. But unfortunately, Sunfire refused to agree. Moreover, Polaris had heard that the Hellfire Club was a terrorist organization.
Want to talk about it? Your father was a member of the Hellfire Club. More than a member, a king.
Polaris didn't meet her biological father until she was 13. Magneto gave her a badge shaped like a helmet. Later, Polaris, who suffered from bipolar disorder, joined the underground organization with the help of the X-Men.
You want to protect the child? Join us.
Polaris didn't tell anyone. Her powers were gradually growing alongside her pregnancy. After some hesitation, Polaris expressed her willingness to cooperate, but Sunfire still firmly disagreed. Because the Hellfire Club would kill indiscriminately, they couldn't abandon their principles to collaborate with such people. At this moment, the hacker girl overheard news on the police channel that they were going to attack the base, where Lauren and her brother were located. Moreover, Campbell had used the siblings as inspiration to develop a device that could combine mutant powers. Two hounds under Turner. One could manipulate gravity, and the other could control inertia. The combined powers were formidable, and they planned to directly destroy the entire building, forcing all the mutants inside to come out. Thunderbird and the others arrived at the scene immediately, and led Reed's family to escape into the woods, but they were surrounded on all sides by Sentinel Center personnel, and the car parked in the distance was also discovered. In a critical moment, the Cuckoo guided Andy, and led everyone safely back to the base. After this battle, everyone chose to trust the Cuckoo Sisters once, and finally agreed to a joint operation. The exposure of the base was actually reported to the Sentinel Center by the three sisters. The Hellfire Club would do anything to achieve its goals. Meanwhile, Campbell was working hard to turn his new invention into an international cooperation project. He had prepared demonstration performances, testing standards, and a series of materials, and was going to Washington this week to report. The Hellfire Club has always been well informed. The Cuckoo Sisters informed the underground organization that Campbell was collaborating with political allies to turn the new weapon into a national event, so he was going to Charlotte tomorrow to attend the current Human Summit. All key anti-mutant figures would be present that day, along with some political and business leaders and members of the humanitarian society. The security measures would be foolproof. They needed to find a way to capture Campbell.
Kidnappers now. I thought we're supposed to be the good guys.
Let's not get so high and mighty. I don't suppose you've shared your criminal past with everyone here.
Blink's expression changed, and she had to find an opportunity to confess to Thunderbird. Previously, out of revenge against the anti-mutant organization, she had assisted the Brotherhood. Thunderbird was indeed disappointed to hear this, because Blink had violated the principle of mutual honesty within the organization. Meanwhile, Andy kept browsing reports about the Fenris twins, and he was obsessed with their immense power. He strongly resonated with the Cuckoo Sisters' approach, which caused Lauren to feel concerned. At this time, Thunderbird went to talk to Reed. Otto left many research notes before his death. His research was the foundation of the Hound program, so Thunderbird asked Reed to look for clues within them. But Reed reviewed most of the notes, and they were mostly unrelated to mutants. At this moment, Campbell was also searching for Otto's research materials, and he found that there was a significant amount missing.
The Hound Project is the key to fighting them off, but Otto Strucker's research can help us wipe out the X gene entirely.
The hacker girl quickly discovered that the Trask laboratory was in detailed discussions with everyone who had worked with Otto. They even sent someone to an insurance company in Decatur. When Caitlin saw the name of the insurance company, "Isn't this where my mother-in-law works?" Reed worried about his mother, and quickly took the children to pick her up. The Cuckoo Sisters led Polaris and the others to wait in a safe house in the woods. In about half an hour, the ticket that would allow them to enter the summit would be delivered. Until then, everyone could rest freely. Esme continued to woo Polaris.
You can do things others can't. Your friends, they
Stop talking about my friends!
Esme said some people think pregnant women are weak, but I know that women who fight for a goal are the strongest. Half an hour later, they had taken hostage the primary donor of the summit. Reed had also picked up his mother and was about to leave, but the Sentinel Center personnel arrived at the scene. Andy didn't listen to his sister's advice to hide, and he didn't plan to scurry around like a mouse, so he struck to repel two agents and intended to eliminate them. Lauren immediately intervened. Their powers clashed, causing both of them to fall. Reed didn't have time to scold the two kids and hurriedly urged them to get in the car and leave. Afterwards, Reed wanted his mother to recall if his father had any secret laboratories or close colleagues in research. The latter thought for a moment and indeed remembered such a person. She often talked to Otto late at night. At the time, the old lady thought her husband was having an affair. She remembered that the female researcher was named Madeline. At the same time, the Cuckoo Sisters manipulated the donor to call the summit, changing their security details, allowing Thunderbird and the others to replace the original security team. With the help of the three sisters, everything was so simple, because the Hellfire Club had a powerful information network behind it. They even knew Thunderbird's clothing size. The donor was completely under the control of the Cuckoos, and they easily infiltrated the summit. Blink transported Thunderbird and Sunfire into the building, and as soon as the second politician's speech ended, Polaris immediately cut off all communication device frequencies. Thunderbird tracked down Dr. Campbell's elevator, and the three of them stood outside the elevator doors. As soon as the elevator door opened, Sunfire released a bright light, but there was also a mutant next to Campbell. He could control the blood within other people's bodies. As Sunfire and Thunderbird engaged in battle with him, Campbell actually took a child hostage. The three had to stop, and soon more security personnel arrived. Thunderbird shielded Blink and blocked the bullets. The three escaped the building through the portal. As the sound of police sirens grew louder, everyone had to retreat first. Polaris reached out of the car window to dismantle a utility pole, temporarily blocking the pursuer's path. Headquarters was extremely anxious upon hearing the news of the failed operation. Andy wanted to rush to the scene for support, but the two locations were too far apart for him to make it in time. At this moment, Reed's family was still unaware that they had left traces during their escape. Turner would soon track down the underground headquarters location. using the hounds. One of the hounds had clairvoyant abilities, and the other could detect organic molecules. The two working together were exceptional at finding people. Thunderbird and the others rushed back to the safe house in the woods. Esme was very angry about the plan's failure. Campbell was about to head to Washington and had bribed important senators, and our failed attack this time would serve as the best excuse for him to expand the Hound program. All of this was because of your sentimentality. Now we must find out Campbell's whereabouts and clean up the mess we've made. Sunfire believed that continuing the pursuit was too dangerous and wanted to escape with Polaris. They could look for a suitable opportunity next time, but Polaris had had enough of being passive. Her thought process was becoming more and more like her father's. Turner had already tracked them down near the base. The mutant guarding released their fear to make them retreat, but Turner saw through this mutant tactic immediately ordered his men to attack with full force. People at headquarters were in a panic, retreating in disorder. These mutants had no emergency response skills whatsoever. At a critical moment, Caitlin and her husband stepped up to take charge. They instructed the bartender to take the children away in an invisible vehicle first. The hacker girl immediately destroyed the hard drives and communication devices. Lauren also warned her brother to prioritize. Our top priority is to ensure everyone evacuates safely. Reed remembered that a part of the vault in the southeast corner leads underground. As long as they could break through the wall, there was a chance to escape. However, the vault's walls were very thick. Fortunately, Shatter could transform the wall's material to help everyone break through. Reed led Lauren and her brother to guard the front, covering everyone as they broke the wall to evacuate. The three of them worked together seamlessly. Turner immediately sent the hounds to attack upon seeing this. Fortunately, at this moment, the wall had already been breached, and everyone was hastening their evacuation. Lauren and Andy knew they couldn't leave any traces. That would allow the Sentinel Center to track their escape route, so they let their parents go first, while they stayed behind to demolish the building.
This is not goodbye. We will see you outside.
Come on.
After their parents had safely evacuated, Lauren and Andy clenched their hands and released their powers. A brilliant white light echoed through the forest. Thunderbird was anxious as he couldn't reach headquarters when Sunfire suddenly ran over and said Polaris was missing. Thunderbird activated his senses, realizing that the Cuckoos had taken Polaris away, so he immediately went to find Esme to ask questions.
They're doing what you couldn't. Campbell and Montez filed the flight plan. They fly out of Morrison Air Center in 20 minutes. The most important thing is to make sure he doesn't get to DC.
Sunfire absolutely couldn't let Polaris kill, and immediately took Thunderbird and blinked to intercept her. Fortunately, when they arrived, Polaris hadn't acted yet.
Not everyone on that plane is trying to hurt us. Innocent people, you take it down.
No matter what they said, Polaris had made up her mind to create a world where mutants wouldn't have to hide for her unborn child, so she concentrated all her power and directly destroyed the helicopter's engine. The helicopter crashed on the spot, and Polaris took the chance to leave amidst the explosion. The mutants who safely evacuated reached a transfer station in Tennessee. Thunderbird and the others swiftly gathered there, and the survivors huddled in a small base, discussing where mutants should go from here. Thunderbird and Sunfire naturally wanted to rebuild the base and connect with all the underground networks, continuing to protect everyone like the X-Men did. But the surviving mutants had already realized that hiding was utterly useless. If the Sentinel Center could destroy one base, it could certainly destroy the next one as well. Just then, Polaris and the Cuckoo Sisters appeared.
That world, where we don't have to hide, that we've always talked about, I want to build that.
The bartender, the hacker girl, and most mutants voluntarily joined Polaris's camp. I can only say, she is truly Magneto's daughter. Andy also found himself at odds with his family's beliefs. Ignoring his parents' objections, he left with Polaris. The story of Season 1 ends here. Since it's an older series from 2017, the special effects and other aspects are certainly lacking. This show managed to gain some popularity back then, and Polaris's looks were definitely a major contributor. The casting for several key characters was very fitting. The pacing of the story was fast, and it was packed with information, with multiple storylines coming together in smooth logic. The first few episodes were quite enjoyable, but as it progressed, it became more cliched. It was still discussing the ideological differences of the X-Men. If you enjoy my channel, please click subscribe.